Hello.
I hope you're all comfortable with déjà vu. I'd like to start with an exercise that might feel familiar, I have a feeling. I'd like to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Turn your attention inwards, focusing on your heart. Are you aware of it beating in your chest? Can you count your heartbeats?
Maintaining your focus inward. Increase your heart rate and accelerate your breathing. And gently open your eyes and look at the person sitting next to you, to your right. Observe how they are sitting and copy their position. Thank you. Thank you. You can relax now. What you just did is acting in its purest form. You altered your physical state, your stance, your breath, your heartbeat, to become other. And that physical state is intimately connected to your inner world, to your world of emotions. My breathing, for instance, is so intimately connected to how I'm feeling that just like the chicken and the egg, we can ask which came first, breath or emotion? Does my breath become shallow and irregular if I'm feeling anxious, just like this? Or do I feel anxious if I breathe that way? Conversely, don't we all try to calm ourselves by breathing slowly and deeply? So as you can see, there is a correlation here. And the exercise we ask you to do can be understood as a basis for acting. Now, the work of an actor can, in very simple terms, be understood as the charting and navigating of an emotional and physical route that is not their own, that is indeed other. Throughout the centuries, acting has changed and evolved enormously. What we consider to be good acting or believable acting has shifted. And even the definition of acting itself has been the subject of much discussion. Now, we can create categories to classify different types or schools or traditions of acting according to a range of criteria. But today, actually, it is tonight already, I would like to focus on the creative tension between the inner and outer world, between emotion and body. So, first category, the inside-out tradition. These schools of acting favor emotional and psychological work. The actor starts from and focuses primarily on the feeling, expecting the body, the physical manifestation of that feeling, to naturally or more or less organically follow. Now, the outside-in tradition, second category. These schools of acting focus on physical and vocal work. The actor develops what the audience sees and hears and expects them to identify and recognize those elements as an emotional journey.
So what does it feel like, this sense of becoming other? When you tried it just now, was it immediately clear or did it develop? What was the difference between your experience of your breathing originally and your breathing after you tried to change it? And when you adopted the position of the person sitting next to you, was it still their position or was it now yours? What I'm getting at is a distinction that's often taken for granted in a modern individualistic society between a sense of self and a sense of other. I'm me, everyone else is everyone else, It's a dichotomy so embedded in popular culture, sometimes it's like a secret language everyone's expected to just get. I'm sure many of you have heard some version of this conversation. Oh, you just have to be yourself.
Oh yeah, from now on, I'm just going to be myself, okay?
Both interlocutors feeling remarkably pleased at having exchanged no information whatsoever.
None.
This becomes particularly pronounced when talking about bodies, our physical selves. Maybe it's easy to accept that a mysterious, amorphous mind self is indistinct from others, but our bodies are just simple fleshly vessels, right? Well, perhaps not. There's a relatively new and rapidly evolving field in neuroscience that's already begun to make clear that a physical self-representation, which includes your ownership over your body and the meanings you confer to your movements and expressions, is not a constant that you're born with. It's something you're forever creating based on your interactions with other people and your environment, a collection of processes going on in a moment that all feed into an experience of selfhood. Indeed, here's yet another very problematic dichotomy that's increasingly unsupported by science between mind and body. Our bodies are what our brains and indeed minds are evolved to take care of. They come as a unit. This new field I mentioned studies a lesser-known sense called interoception. This refers to the visceral signals that together create a sense of your internal environment, such as your heartbeat, hunger, thirst, digestion, pain, and emotions. The task you did earlier when you tried to count your heartbeat is actually a simple measure we use in the lab to quantify the extent of your conscious awareness of your interoceptive processes by comparing the subjective count to an objective heart rate reading. And we often talk about our emotions in terms of interoceptive signals. If I was to describe how I felt in the weeks coming up to this talk, I might say I had butterflies in my stomach, I was in a cold sweat, my heart skipped a beat as I was getting on stage. But how do we truly convey an interoceptive experience, especially non-verbally, to another self that isn't constituted of all the same processes that give you that experience? This is, as George explained, of particular relevance to actors who make it their living to consciously and physically communicate an experience to other people. And what's particularly unique here is that it's not just their own experience, which is challenging enough to express, it's another experience. An actor must empathize with the character they're playing in order to understand their motivations and how they would behave in a given situation. They must know their own quirks and bodies well enough to know how they would differ from the character. They must empathize with their audience in order to know how their movements will be perceived, in order to get the audience to empathize with them. That's a whole lot of empathizing. And it's a fascinatingly complex thing to ask a brain to do. There are traditions of acting that have varying theories on how to do all of this, but there's not a lot of empirical research on how it works or what the optimal strategies are. This is what our lab, led by James Kilner at the Institute of Neurology, is just beginning to explore. What does believable acting actually mean? Is a more interoceptively aware or empathetic actor more capable of inducing an emotional response than an observer? Does an actor really need to have an interoceptive emotional experience in order to convey it? Or, if it were practically possible, would they just have to make all the right movements?
Well, emotions are immaterial. They can't themselves be seen, be tasted, be felt by others. So, communicating emotions is a vital issue for actors, and the body becomes the interface for communicating those emotions. The only way for you to know how I am feeling is by the effect that my emotions have on my body and on my voice, which is itself a bodied phenomenon. I mean, you know how nervous I am standing here with Anjali, not by grasping my nervousness itself, but by deciphering it from the tension on my right shoulder, or the wringing of my hands, or the sound my dry mouth makes between words, and of course by how much I've been stuttering. And And of course, that in return, I know how effective I am or not by how many times you've yawned, or by how much you've been fidgeting in your chair, or even by the number of times that you've checked your phone. Yes, madam, I can see you. So, but it is not hard to understand how an extreme version of any of these techniques of acting, inside out or outside in, will inevitably lead to failed acting or not believable acting. So, on the one hand, you have the emotional actor who feels everything ever so intensely at every step of the way, but who fails to externalize anything at all. Just imagine an extreme close-up, part of an incredibly emotional scene, but shot after a Botox disaster. You can see my point. Or then the actor who can't complete the scene because they're so caught up in their emotions, which are so extreme and so unbridled, that they lose control over their body and their voice. I mean, there is no way they can move, they can say the text, let alone sing the aria, until the convulsive sobbing comes to an end. On the other hand, and at the other end of the spectrum, you have the virtuoso actor, whose physical and vocal acrobatics and surgical precision ensure a repeatable and reliable performance. However, that choreography or the vocal fireworks are disconnected from a real emotional place. I mean, they reference acting cliches instead of real emotional reactions, thus becoming nothing more than a sterile pantomime. Engaging, sometimes, okay, even entertaining, but ultimately dead in the eyes.
And just like these irregularities of embodiment in acting, many irregularities of body image are a result of conflict between felt interoceptive and observed information. People with eating disorders can't reconcile the body they see in the mirror with the one they feel they have, which is deeply influenced by interactions with other people. Some patients with a paralyzed limb after a stroke develop such a strong discord between how they feel about that limb and what they can see that their internal experience overwrites their visual feedback, leading them to sometimes say, "What are you talking about? I'm not paralyzed, I'm fine." And sometimes they will go as far as to say, "That's not my arm, that's my husband's arm." At the center of these problems, and those many of us face in dealing with our bodies and ourselves, is an uncertainty that comes from constant change. But our bodies are not passive victims of the chaos that they inhabit. They're actually remarkably proficient at adapting to an ever-changing environment. In fact, this is the fundamental difference between being alive and not. Living organisms are energetically open systems. They have to interact with their environment in order to maintain an internal state that's as stable as possible by seeking out a warmer coat, or a sandwich, or a more emotionally fulfilling relationship. Otherwise, they would decompose very quickly. This is called homeostasis. And in a sense, self-acceptance is a homeostatic drive too. And it comes with the understanding and embracing of ourselves, our bodies, and our physical and social environments as concepts in flux.
The two of us come to remarkably similar inferences. And this is coming from disciplines that are often seen as very distant from each other. Both actors and non-actors must therefore strive to reach this homeostatic balance by processing both inner and outer feedback. And in order to process those inner and outer voices, we must be present in the moment. We must be mindful. We must be connected both inwardly and outwardly. The result, the ultimate capacity for adaptation of our bodies and indeed of our sense of self. Thank you.